Welcome to Baseera Inner Reflections.
Welcome back, Sister Fatima. This is our second episode of Baseera Inner Reflections. Amazing to have you, mashallah. This time, we would love to get your behind-the-scenes reflections about our international students of Islamic psychology history. So we'll start by, in this day and age, why do we need Islamic psychology? Your thoughts on that?
Okay, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wonderful, alhamdulillah, to be with you both. Why do we need Islamic psychology? SubhanAllah. I think, actually just very recently or in this last year, as we are interacting with people, in person again, and the RIS convention, which is the Reviving the Islamic Spirit conference here in Toronto, a very large and kind of, alhamdulillah, beautiful conference.
A beautiful gathering, yeah.
Yeah, and very, very
diverse.
You can see what happens when the youth are allowed to, kind of flourish, alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah.
Anyways, my point was that this year it was in person and we had the booth at RIS for ISIP, for International Students of Islamic Psychology. And one of the things that repeatedly people were coming and saying to us, which is also something that I think, yourself and Sister Zainab can also attest to, is that when we speak to Muslims who have sought therapy, so number one, destigmatizing seeking therapy is very important. But even when Muslims have gone and then they've struggled with a therapist who doesn't understand their worldview. And when, as we know, when people are going, you don't want to, as a Muslim, spend time in your therapy session trying to explain to someone what your worldview is. And you would like the person to understand that and not have to spend time doing that, but also not to feel like that, because the relationship between, religion and psychology has been fraught and has been frayed and separated. And so there can also almost be a sense of defensiveness of I don't want to be challenged about, why my family's a particular way or why I'm wearing hijab or as other people have told me when they've gone, they're kind of like, oh, well, maybe, you could consider dating or blah, blah. And it's kind of like you're looking at the therapist like, wow, you really don't understand where I'm coming from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really appreciate you bringing that point. Exactly. Yes.
Yes. So why do we need Islamic psychology? Because we need to understand that we have to function first from that sense of in the therapist-client, at least, relationship, but also just in general of just understanding our framework. And, alhamdulillah, just very recently, ISIP North America, we had our book club starting. This is all going to weave into how ISIP started. But recently, ISIP North America, we had our first article, and it was about, cognitive restructuring in an Islamic perspective. And those kinds of key frameworks, like a Muslim, a practicing, observing Muslim understands that this dunya is the dunya, but really our aim is akhirah. We have a different lens of being in this world because we understand that this world is temporary. That in and of itself, we understand that we have a soul. We understand that we have a creator and we're here to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are fundamental frameworks, that we function from. And when someone doesn't quite understand that or doesn't understand the importance of that, that can really, create some difficulties in that relationship specifically, but also just in general in how we're interacting with the world. So I think there's a huge need for us as Muslims to be able to have these conversations in terms of what is Islamic psychology, because it doesn't quite mimic obviously just a Western paradigm of psychology, but it's bringing in the holistic tradition, which is a long-standing part of our tradition. And so it's really just trying to reconnect with that for Muslims who are, for Muslims in general, but also, for Muslims who are entering these types of fields as well.
And I think we can, one thing that ISIP has been endeavoring to do is to, we kind of introduce the work of our, scholars from our Islamic heritage, like Ibn Balkhi. I mean, these names were quite hidden, obviously even Imam Ghazali, it's very quite hidden to probably the ordinary Muslims. So I think what, ISIP, alhamdulillah, this is one of the things that it's really amazing is some of these scholars whose names are very hidden, their works were very hidden and maybe accessible to, a certain, maybe an audience, a certain level of scholarship, is now accessible to through the works of ISIP, because this is one thing I think ISIP is trying to do is meet the ordinary Muslim. And I think when you introduced, mashallah, the need of it, the need of it is just, like you mentioned, we cannot underestimate the need of it, because, it's about the self, Islamic psychology. And this is one thing that I think many of our speakers and our international lectures always mention about, and mashallah. And, I wanted to take the discussion a bit further, Sister Fatima. How was it starting off, ISIP? How did ISIP come about?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. I know that Sayyid Jamaluddin, inshallah, that you will be speaking with him, or you have spoken with him. And so mashallah, la quwwata illa billah. So yeah, as you mentioned, Sister Zainab, like a lot of those names, and this wasn't, as my background as Sister Aya shared at the beginning, is like I'm an educator. I've been in education. So the mental health field was not my field. It was when I enrolled in the program that I just completed, alhamdulillah, in the University of Toronto, which is the Emmanuel College. It's spiritually the pastoral studies, which, to tell you the truth, I didn't even know what pastoral studies. I was like, what? I did, like, it was just such a, like, that word also, we don't, like, in our Muslim tradition, even though we have, like I said, we have a long-standing tradition of ilm an-nafs, but that word, has very obviously been dominated by the Christian tradition. So I wasn't connecting, with that. I hadn't heard of the program that I, eventually started. So this was not my field. And so, yeah, previous to, I would say 2019, I'd never heard of, Abu Zayd al-Balkhi either. And so what happened was I started my program in January 2020, really by Allahu Akbar. It was just a calling that came to me upon going to a lecture that the Emmanuel College offered, which was on Indigenous and Muslim healing practices. So I attended that. And just, I think there was a coalescing of like being in a beautiful space, a beautiful campus. I'd been out of school for a really long time. I've been working for a very long time. So just reconnecting with that whole, like university and learning and blah, blah, blah. Like I'm a lifelong learner. I love learning. So that, plus of course the topic. And at the end of that lecture, Dr. Naveen Reda, who again, at the time, I did not know who she was or what she was affiliated with, but she is, mashallah, may Allah bless her, she's actually the one who really helped establish the Muslim focus stream of this program. So she was advertising the MPS program, and I've done psychology, alhamdulillah, I've studied abroad, the Islamic sciences, and this is an opportunity to bring both of those together. What? I'm on board. So I went to her immediately and I said, I want to enroll and I want to apply. And within 10 days, I got everything together. And, that was just, Allah's karam that everything kind of worked out like that. And I started in January 2020. So once I started getting my feet wet in this, the University of Michigan, the Institute for Muslim Mental Health and the University of Michigan, they do a conference. Now, as we all know, I started in person January 2020, and March 2020, COVID was full blown here in Toronto and across the world, but our lockdown started happening in March. So I remember I had to finish that first semester very, very, very abruptly, and everything was switched to Zoom. And everything went on Zoom. That was a whole different learning experience. But what happened was, as Sayyid Jamaluddin often says, and as we have written on the ISIP website, our history of how this came about, one of the blessings of COVID and one of the things that happened was, because everything went online, all of these conferences that I normally probably would not have thought of, attending, or, or usually if they're in Australia or whatever, across the ocean, it's a different, obviously the expenses and the timings, nothing was as accessible as obviously just sitting in your home and opening the computer. So I attended this conference, the Muslim Mental Health Conference. It was the 13th one that they'd done. First one, obviously online, and first one that I had ever attended. And I'd never attended an online conference. I was like, what is that even going to be like? And alhamdulillah, I attended. I actually enjoyed it. I was taking notes. And that is where I met Sayyid Jamaluddin online through one of the side panels. And they had a lot of different opportunities for the participants of the conference to meet through different chats. And so through one of the chats, Brother Jamaluddin said, is anybody interested in a Islamic Psychology WhatsApp group? And I said, I am. And so that's how that started. But what precipitated it as well, so there was, like I said, there was two things happening. It was like me going through my program, and then also, obviously connecting with Jamaluddin, and then the resources that started coming through. And I knew that having been an educator for many years in a public school system, I realized that I was just a cog in a system that is now Muslim, but it's not a Muslim system. And I thought, if I take another profession, a second profession, I don't want to do that same thing. I want to actually, for my own sake, I really actually want to understand, for example, like, I don't want to just be a Muslim therapist. I really want to work from a basis that is Islamic. And that is the difference, of what Islamic psychology is. And so that's what really my own personal kind of motivation kind of came from, that like, I want to know what is our ways of healing and well-being, in this world. And of course, like me being a practicing Muslim, I'm just representing, I wanted something a little bit deeper. So that's what my personal motivation continues to be in ISIP. And then what happened was all those resources that were being shared, Sayyid Jamaluddin and myself knew that, like, well, this is, we can't, how are we going to harness this? You can't do that on WhatsApp, right? So we knew that needed to be organized and harnessed and structured in a particular way so that it could be of more benefit. And the first initiative, actually, and that's why I said I would come back to it, because was a book club. And the first book that we covered was Abu Zayd al-Balkhi's Sustenance of the Soul. So those were kinds of the things that gave that impetus to, like, okay, now let's start this organization, because we could see, mashallah, Sayyid Jamaluddin, as you all know, the heart and soul and passion of ISIP. And so he had grown that WhatsApp group to a tremendous volume. And then and so then harnessing those resources, created the ISIP digital library. So our first initiatives through ISIP was the digital library, which alhamdulillah now is available to all. And, may Allah bless all of those initial volunteers, who internationally from all over the world, who helped to make that, and then the book club. And so those were the two kinds of things that kind of pushed the organization to a different level, where we knew, like, oh, okay, we need to, like, get this a bit more organized now.
Mashallah. And it's just amazing the way ISIP has grown. I mean, we're in 2023 now, so subhanAllah, in 3 years, it's just amazing. And mashallah, all the volunteers, and ISIP is completely voluntary, so alhamdulillah, so everybody's time and all the efforts that mashallah, professionals put in, the sisters and brothers all over the world, and especially and your dedication, Sister Fatima, what keeps you going, mashallah? I know that sometimes it's easy to start up something, that initial vision, it can be exciting, and then we can sometimes see something falling, because sometimes they go, you just go, but mashallah, I've seen consistency.
Alhamdulillah, this is, I think it's people's du'as. It definitely was a lot, having a full-time job, doing my master's and ISIP literally all at the same time. So I think a lot of people du'as and a lot of people's sincerity have helped ISIP, alhamdulillah, and I'm just happy to be of service. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, accepts all of our efforts and does continue to send those beautiful people who are giving so much to it. I think personally, I will say all of the feedback forms. So I'm going to do my plug for feedback forms. I have in the last 2 years, I have read every single one of those feedback forms, every single one.
MashaAllah, I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
I do. I literally
Oh,
do. I have
that.
read every single feedback form, and there are so many people who, we all have moments where it's like, I can't do this. This is just too much. And being in North America, and a lot of our colleagues in ISIP are across the ocean, right? So like 5:30, in the morning, we're having meetings, and that just became a regular part of my life. Alhamdulillah, it's such a Mubarak time, but it's also, like I was trying to also go to work. So
Absolutely.
there have been many, many, many times where it's like, oh my goodness, I need to step back. And then it's like a feedback form will literally say something so beautiful and so touching and so meaningful of like, through this, I have found a community. I have been inspired. I still remember last year, we did a 5-part series with Dr. Usman Bakr. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like reward him immensely. And I was basically managing that. So, hundreds of emails that I was just kind of responding to and questions and whatnot. And that was over the course of 5 months. There was one in particular from the Philippines. And the person, Allahu Akbar, they would be taking a boat to travel to one of the other mainlands so that they could have internet service for those Saturdays that Dr. Usman that
Allahu
was
Akbar.
offering that I
Allahu
just really had to humble myself.
Allah, I
And
have goosebumps. Allahu Akbar.
I mean, it was like, I read that email and I was like, wow, Fatma, you just gotta be quiet. Your nafs just needs to settle down because, I'm in North America, don't experience any of that kind of, needs of like internet. That's something that we take for granted, right? So when we see that, people all over the world are really connecting with what ISIP is offering, that is from the karam of Allah and the fadl of Allah. And we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps us to be of service. So, I still need everybody's dua. So
Always, dear
so,
sister, always,
inshallah, may
mashallah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, continue to give us good health, to be able to continue, inshallah.
MashaAllah, really appreciate this part of behind the scenes, really, because as a relatively new member to ISIP, I don't consider new anymore, but I've joined the 5:30 and 6 a.m. meetings, and I've seen the dedication, mashallah. This was one of the very attractive points in the whole movement, mashallah, tabarakallah. But the feedback, we should actually make more focus on the feedback forms and highlight how important and how impactful it is to share thoughts for the growth of the movement, for the growth of the foundation and the whole strength of ummah and the direction, mashallah. I love that. Jazakallah khair, sister.
Mashallah, is had truly an honor, Sister Fatima, again, mashallah, to have this podcast with you. But unfortunately, we're coming again to the end of time. I had still so many questions because I really feel it's just really humbling, like you said, just hearing these journeys, and then mashallah, hearing your journey. And like you said, sometimes we need to settle our nafs as well. So maybe a good reminder for us as well, inshallah. So Jazakumullah khairan, may Allah reward you and give you the best of health, inshallah, and continue, ISIP growing as we are seeing it grow, inshallah, and into a beautiful organization, inshallah.
MashaAllah, la quwwata illa billah. It's absolutely my honor and my pleasure connecting with you, Sister Zainab, probably around 2 years ago, and Sister Aya, now for the last couple of months. It's these beautiful souls, both of you and all of the brothers and sisters in ISIP, that MashaAllah, la quwwata illa billah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant all of you afiyah and grant you much tawfiq fi dunya wal akhirah. Barakallahu feekum. It's my absolute pleasure to spend this time with you. It was very enjoyable for myself as well. So thank you so much.
MashaAllah, alhamdulillah. Barakallah.
Many other episodes to come. This is not the
Inshallah,
last
yes.
one.
Yeah, we're looking forward, inshallah, mashallah, to have Sister Fatima back again, inshallah. But in the meantime, please do check out the ISIP website, which is www.isip.foundation, inshallah. And we just want to say jazakumullah khair for everybody joining us online, wherever you are. Keep safe, inshallah. Now we've finished with the closing dua. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Come whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of living, it doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vow 1,000 times, come yet again, come. Maulana Jamaluddin Rumi.